Hello summoners and welcome to another episode of ProGuides Best Champions to Main, now on patch 10.14. These champions are all about high performance with low ban rates that are unlikely to get nerfed in the immediate future. The most reliable picks in the game that are the most worthy of investing time in. Before we get started though, our question of the day is, which 3 champions do you have the highest mastery on? Let us know your answer in the comments below, or hop into our Discord to discuss it with the rest of the ProGuides community. Now, without further delay, we'll get right into it. Leading off this list in the top lane is Yorick, one of the most underappreciated champions of all time. Yorick is constantly forgotten about and underestimated, which is hilarious because he's one of the most formidable split pushers in the game. Yorick's Q is an empowered auto attack that deals bonus damage and heals him, and as an added bonus, if it kills the target, a grave is dug. If Yorick lands his E, a thrown skill shot, then all the graves he's dug turn into mistwalkers that jump at the target and start mauling them. Most people, of course, run away from this, so Yorick can use his W to raise a ring of terrain in a target area to keep enemies locked in for their beating. His ult spawns the Maiden of the Mist, a spirit that helps Yorick dish out extra damage and get side lane split pushes going. He's unusual for sure, but Yorick mains regularly demolish unsuspecting enemies. Our second top laner for 10.14 is Kayle, the late game goddess herself. Kayle is the premier scaling champion of League of Legends, but she has such an incredibly small ban rate because it's challenging to get her out of the early game, so most people avoid her. As Kayle levels up, she gains more power and enhanced abilities until eventually she's whipping out waves of damage with her auto attacks. Her Q is a ranged projectile that slows and damages targets hit, and is essential for her survival in the laning phase. Her W is another important part of her early game, as the heal and movement speed boost it offers let her escape from bad situations that would otherwise result in her death. Kayle's E is the Haymaker, an empowered auto attack that deals more damage the lower the target is, dealing a huge burst. Last but not least, what good is a hyper carry if they can be damaged and killed? Kayle's ultimate not only makes her invincible, but also drops a slew of holy blades around her for a large chunk of damage around her. Piloting Kayle is mostly about positioning, so just keep that in mind when you're locking her in. The third top lane pick for 10.14 is Singed. Singed is absolutely a champion to main, since his playstyle is one of the most unique in the game. You can't just casually pick up Singed and play him on occasion, you have to dedicate yourself to learning the ins and outs of his particular brand of league. Singed thrives on making enemy champions chase him down, and the reason this playstyle works is thanks to his Q's gas trail. It slowly takes down his enemies' lives, all the while they're probably trying to track him down through his W's slow patch. Enemies try to cut you off? Use your E to fling them behind you and ground them in your W. Enemies still chasing? Pop your R for the speed boost and leave them in the dust. It does sound simple, but in order to make it effective, you have to be playing the macro game immaculately, being as distracting as possible. And to have that knowledge, you'll have to main Singed, at least for a little bit. Here are those top lane builds in case you missed anything. Dr. Mundo is our first jungle pick to main on 10.14. The hulking pile of muscles is a particularly good low elo stomper, since many players in that range lack the game knowledge to buy grievous wounds before it's too late. Mundo's cleavers are his bread and butter. A Mundo landing cleavers is a Mundo climbing the ladder. His W raises his tenacity and places a swirling damage over time effect around at the cost of ticking down his health to keep it running. It's very effective for clearing the more populous jungle camps and helps him keep the chase going when enemies try to CC him. His E is an empowered auto attack reset that costs a chunk of his health in exchange for raised damage output for his next few autos, helping him come out victorious in extended trades. Mundo's ultimate is the Big Heal, letting him laugh in the face of his enemies as they pour damage into him and he shrugs it off, all while enjoying a substantial movement speed boost. He's a tanky boy, so if your team needs frontline, Mundo's your man. Speaking of tanky boys, Rammus is our second pick in the jungle for patch 10.14's champions to main. Rammus is quite possibly the best anti-AD tank in the whole game, and he's an absolute menace for ADCs. The only challenge is not getting your life ruined by invaders. Rammus's Q lets him roll into a ball and wheel himself at enemies, often blowing flashes in the process as they desperately try to get away. Once Rammus has gotten himself into the fight, his W gives him a huge defensive stat boost, as well as granting him a free Thornmail effect, punishing anyone who's auto-attacking him. This ability is especially significant since his E is a taunt that forces enemies to auto-attack him, essentially forcing them to destroy their own health bars against Rammus's armored exterior. His ultimate is kind of subtle since it's just a pulsing damage effect, but it flies under the radar, and before people know it, their health bars have been reduced to rubble. And now, rounding out the trifecta of jungle frontliners on 10.14 is Sejuani. Sejuani is another tanky jungler, but what sets her apart from the other jungle tanks is the sheer volume of her CC. Her Q is a charging dash that displaces any enemy it comes into contact with, as well as just letting her make surprise plays or escape over thin walls. Her W swings her flail out in an arc in front of her and then lashes out with it, marking enemies with each stroke for her E stun. Additionally, melee allies nearby can add stacks for her E stun, and at 4 stacks, she can point and click her E to lock enemies down. Sejuani's ultimate is a long-ranged ice bola, perfect for making picks and forcing fights. After the ultimate has landed, she and her team can rush in to follow up and start applying her E-stun to dominate fights. She's a great utility pick to have in your champion pool, and she resurfaces in the meta pretty much every year, especially after buffs as nice as the ones she just received. And the jungle builds are up on your screen here to take a peek at. The first mid laner that you should be maining on patch 10.14 is Malzahar. He's not the most exciting champion, but he's extremely effective. Malz is a great mid laner for wave clearing and shutting down high mobility threats. He can use his E on the wave to apply a damage over time effect that slowly eats away at the enemy health bars. If the E kills its target, it jumps to the nearest enemy in range. From there, he can use his W to spawn voidlings that will pursue and attack whatever target he's marked with his E. His Q is a void pulse that pincers inward, applying magic damage to enemies and refreshing the duration of his E. This combo can be used to heavily damage an enemy or to eradicate a minion wave to keep an enemy pushed. When teamfights roll around, Malzahar's job is actually extremely simple. Press R on the most valuable target possible to hold them still long enough for his team to obliterate them. And speaking of holding people in place to obliterate them, Galio is our second mid lane pick, primarily for his ability to show up on the map wherever he's needed. Galio is a well-rounded pick, offering a little frontline and a lot of damage and utility. His passive occasionally empowers his auto attacks to smash the ground and deal AoE damage, helping him clear waves so he can rotate more effectively. His Q lets him whip forth a set of tornadoes that damage anything they travel through and repeatedly tick damage once they settle in. This again helps Galio wave clear effectively, as well as poke enemies. His W is a channeled taunt that lets Galio keep the attention on him, and is a great follow-up for his E, a dashing punch that can put him in the middle of a fight. But Galio's ultimate is why people keep picking him though, since he's able to jump into the air, shield allies, and knock up anyone in his landing zone. The roaming potential this offers is extremely valuable to any team, and enables more aggressive plays for his team. Our third champion to main in the mid lane for patch 10.14 is Lux. Lux is a well-rounded mage pick who can bring a lot to the table. In lane, her E is strong poke that's difficult to avoid, and out of lane, her Q's double snare can create a surprising amount of picks for her team to follow up on. Her W's shield might seem small, but it can make a huge difference in teamfights if she lands it on her allies. Lux's ultimate, of course, needs no introduction, since all of us have been blasted from a million miles away before. But suffice it to say that it can put in work, blasting teamfights or stragglers that are near death. Nothing will remain but a pile of ashes and the echoes of Lux's nightmarish laughter. Here are those mid lane builds for you one more time. Jinx is our first bot lane carry to main on patch 10.14. Jinx is a long-ranged hyper carry who dominates teamfights. And with enchanters back in the bottom lane to enable hyper carries like her, and the added bonus of Varus getting nerfed into the ground, Jinx is getting a chance to shine again. Her passive gives her free attack speed, which feeds into the effectiveness of her Q. When she uses Q, she swaps between her Gatling gun to gain even more attack speed, and her rocket launcher to deal AoE damage and dominate teamfights. Jinx's W is a long-ranged zap that not only deals a large chunk of damage, but also significantly slows enemies, making it a good tool for peeling for herself or for chasing down those enemies. Jinx's E is another self-peeling tool, with its multiple traps keeping enemies from getting too close. When Jinx isn't popping off and right-clicking teamfights into submission, she's using her ultimate rocket to snipe kills and finish off enemies praying for an escape. She's a really strong carry with a team around her, so consider putting some time in on her. Our second bot lane carry to main in patch 10.14 is Twitch. Like Jinx, Twitch is a hyper carry who's heavily benefiting from the resurgence of enchanters, and he as well is fantastic at crushing teamfights. Twitch doesn't have the strongest laning phase, but don't underestimate the strength of his passive. If he can last through a trade long enough to get 6 stacks of his poison applied, he can easily ruin his enemies' lives. His Q lets him go invisible to get the drop on his enemies, and when he resurfaces, he gets a huge attack speed steroid. Twitch's W lets him throw a cask of venom to slow every enemy in its area, applying stacks of Twitch's poison if they stay in too long. This is good for peeling, but it's also a valuable offensive tool for maximizing his stacks as fast as possible. Twitch's E is the money maker and deals damage to every enemy affected by his stacks, proportionate to how many stacks they have. His ultimate increases his range by a ton, letting him load up and blast entire teams from the right angle. Because Twitch takes so much positioning, he can require a lot of practice to really perform on. So if you want help mastering the Plague Rat, head over to ProGuides.com and one of our coaches can teach you the finer points of becoming the second most contagious thing in the world right now. Sivir is our third bot lane carry for 10.14, and like always, she's a great champion to main because she is never ever banned and she offers a ton of utility. Her wave clear with her Q's boomerang throw and her W's ricocheting auto attacks is pretty much unmatched by any other ADC, and most champions in general. Most of Sivir's skill expression lies in using her E's spell shield at the appropriate times. So, if you have a disciplined trigger finger, Sivir might be the carry for you. Along with the rest of her utility, Sivir's ultimate offers a huge movement speed boost for her team, letting them run down or escape from a potential team fight. And here are all those bot lane builds for you, so check those out. The first support pick to main on patch 10.14 is Zilean. Zilean players are an elusive bunch, but they know their champion is busted. Boasting one of the most unique kits in League, Zilean is a champion that excels at making clutch saves for his allies. Before he can get to that stage of the game though, Zilean's Q-bomb poke carries him through the lane. What's important here is that Zilean's Q is his only damaging ability, but that's all he needs. Zilean's W lets him drastically lower the cooldown of his Q and E spells, so he can cast them twice in a row. Should Zilean land 2 Qs on the same target, the target and any other enemies in the Q's explosion range are stunned. His E, on the other hand, can be used on allies or enemies. If used on enemies, it's an extreme slow. If used on allies, it's an equally powerful speed buff. It's up to Zilean to decide which one will be more impactful. Zilean's ultimate, however, is what defines the champion. He can just press R on an ally to resurrect them if they take fatal damage while they're under its mark. This is a great ability for thwarting dive comps or anyone else that has to full-on commit to all-inning your carries. Our second support pick for 10.14's best champions to main is Soraka. Enchanters have been killing it lately, and Soraka is one of the best there is. Her Q's poke damage and slow are super oppressive, especially when she also gets health back whenever she lands one. Her W's heal is ridiculously strong at later levels, and once Athene's is completed, it gets even harder to deal with. Soraka's E is her silence, and learning where and when to use it is part of what separates the good Sorakas from the bad Sorakas, as the root that comes a few seconds later can be integral to peeling for your team. Soraka's ultimate is another reason she's such a good champion to main, since it's a global heal and it lets her influence the map. Being able to turn fights on other parts of the map is great for solo queue, and baiting your opponents into bad plays can give big leads for your team. Nami is our third support pick to main on patch 10.14. Nami is a jack-of-all-trades type support, except instead of just being okay at a lot of things, she's pretty good at a lot of things. Nami's a great support to blind pick due to this versatility, so maining her is actually a great choice. Nami's W is her primary trading tool in lane, allowing her to damage enemies while also healing herself to negate damage dealt to her during the trade. Nami's Q bubble is a great setup for all-ins or peeling, and its AoE stun is invaluable if you can land it. Landing the Q is hard, but Nami's E does make it easier with the slow it applies to enemies. Alternatively, she can take the easier route and toss her ultimate down the lane to knock everyone up. But regardless of how she uses it, the tidal wave is a crazy tool for engaging or disengaging. And finally, those support builds are up for you again one more time. Thanks for watching, guys. We hope you enjoyed this video along with the rest of our patch 10.14 series. Once again, let us know in the comments below or in Discord which 3 champions you have the most mastery points on, so we can hit you with the hot, fresh heart react. We really do love hearing from you guys. We'll see you next time. Good luck on the Rift, and wash your hands.